Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host, Craig Fowler, and we are continuing with this extended review of the opening weekend of the Scottish Premiership season. Thank you to those who joined us for part one, as myself and Craig Cairns talked through the two exciting games on Saturday, as Livingston came from 2 goals down to draw with Kilmarnock at Rugby Park, and Motherwell outplayed Rangers but couldn't get the 3 points with a 1-1 draw at Fir Park on Saturday evening. Now we move to Sunday's games. 3 of them took place over the course of the day. That was Falkirk drawing 2 each with Dundee United in their first Premiership game in 15 years. Celtic defeating St Mirren by 1-0. And the game that we will start with on this podcast typically would probably start with Falkirk Dundee United, but seeing as my guest for this show is the one, the only Gary Cocker. Hello, Gary.
Hello, Craig.
Yes, it feels only fitting that we start with Gary's misery as his Dundee side, off the back of a terrible Premier Sports Cup campaign, slumped to defeat at home to Hibs. A 2-1 defeat with Kieron Bowie scoring both goals for Hibs before Finlay Robertson pulled one back not long after. But despite the fact there remained 1 goal in the match, it wasn't a reflection of how the game went, and it certainly wasn't a reflection of how Dundee approached this match. Gary,
Yes.
First of all, you're looking miserable.
Oh, Craig, you've got no idea. I mean, you say slumped. Slumping is still an active expression of energy, which was more than Dundee managed yesterday. It was...
Died? Did you just die then? Is that it? You just died?
It was by a country mile the most lethargic performance I've seen for a Dundee side since we lost 1-0 to Airdrie at home a few weeks ago. It was... We made 5 changes from the game against Montrose. One of those was enforced because Simon Murray has an injury and he wasn't risked, which meant that basically no one bothered to press the ball. Why would you bother to press the ball against a side that played 120 minutes in midweek and went out with a crushing last-minute extra time winner in Europe? Why would you bother to do that? Especially when they've only made 1 change in the game. So I think it was Hoyle that came in for McGrath. So why bother? Why bother to try to make them expend energy, especially when you're playing at home? Why bother to try and have more than 31% possession at home against a side that played 120 minutes in midweek? It struck me, Craig, as if we were playing to only lose by 1 goal, that we were almost happy to set up and just... not take an absolute thumping, which at one point, unbelievably, it looked like we were going to do, because Hibs scored twice in the space of 3 minutes, and I was beginning to get deja vu all over again for last season's defending.
I mean, Presley's job is to keep you off the bottom, and you aren't on the bottom of the table. Like he's doing fine work so far.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm to clutch at straws, which is what I'm going to have to do this season, we did look more organised defensively than we did last season, and it was a very clear, and you can pick apart whether or not it was the right thing to do or not, but it was essentially a back 5 that we played, an incredibly flat back 5. Technically, Ingram and Samuels were supposed to be wing backs, but they did not push on whatsoever. They did not really impress me. I think I was actually on DTV Goal Comms for this. It was my debut on Club TV. And so I had a little bit more of a dispassionate look at it than the fans I could hear underneath me, opposite me, and to my left-hand side. The ones on the right were having a great time singing the new little Hibs away tune. But
oh yeah, that's it. I have to say that is a catchy number. I am thoroughly looking forward to singing Easter Road sometime in the near future.
Yes, and that's the thing. I did think, could this come back to haunt them? Never a chance. The Dundee only had 2 shots on target, one of which was Finlay Robertson's goal, which came from a Jack Iredale mistake. The other, I can't even remember when it was, and that's how much it sticks in my mind. It is clear, and Presley's spoken about it quite a bit, in fairness, that he said we need to bring in 6 new players. And that's not 6 players to give us options off the bench or anything like that. That is 6 new starting players that we need at the very least, because there are so many of the players that do not fit. Even the system that we're playing is different from the system Presley wants to play, and the reason it's different is because that's the only way that he can make players play something that approximates the position that they have. We have quite an imbalanced squad. We only have one winger at the moment, Tony Yogan, who's probably still our best player, but he was on the bench.
So what? Sorry to interrupt. What is it that Presley wants to do? Like, what is his end goal with this setup?
I think going by what he did in the first couple of friendlies, it's a flat 4-4-2, but then to have the left back tuck in to make a back three and the right back push on, right, and to have the right mid tuck it. So essentially it's sort of moving almost like a 3-5-2 in attack when you've got possession, moving back into a flat 4-4-2.
Kind of like...
A bit like, I was going to say Steve Clarke's Scotland, sort of, or is it like a reverse Steve Clarke?
I was thinking, wasn't he a two up top, was it? But Brendan Rodgers' initial Celtic team with Tierney, like Lustig on one side, who's kind of more of a, could get forward, but more of a kind of defender's right back, kind of tucking in a lot more while Tierney was bombing forward on the left. Yeah,
it's that sort of idea, but the difficulty is that we don't have Tierney and Lustig. We have Ethan Ingram and Amari Samuels. Although it was Luke Graham actually that played that left back role in the 4-4-2, but I digress. The problem as well is that in midfield, Hibs had total control of our midfield. And we've got Paul Digby, who was signed from Cambridge United, Callum Jones, who was signed from Hull City. Callum Jones is a wee bit more energetic in box-to-box, but Digby is essentially a holding midfielder. But he was, to my mind, totally anonymous in the game. We didn't create any chances of note. Hibs did not have to get out of second gear. It was actually, I think if David Gray had been asked before the game, what would be the ideal situation for you here, he would have said, well, hopefully Dundee just set off us, don't really expect us to do much. I can make a couple of comfy changes on the hour mark to sort of rest a few boys ahead of Thursday, and we walk away from here with 3 points. But that's never going to happen, don't be daft. And that's exactly what happened. It's going to be certainly a very long August for Dundee. If we get in the bodies that we're supposed to be getting in, Presley's speaking about the fact that we want to sign players rather than get them in on loan. And he's claiming that's part of why we've been slower than literally every other side in Scotland in the transfer market, despite the fact a lot of other sides in the transfer market have been signing players permanently too, including one that we will come on to talk about in the not-too-distant future. It's very concerning. It looked for all the world like it was damage limitation yesterday, which you can't be doing at home on opening day, especially when we hadn't won at home on opening day in the top tier since 1985. Roger Moore was James Bond. Get Into the Groove by Madonna was number one the last time that Dundee won an opening tie at home in the top tier.
That is wild. That's a wild stat. Looking at Presley. So, an easy fix in this situation, normally, what supporters would be calling for is just sack the manager. Not up to it, sack him, get somebody else in better. It was a gamble, it's not worked. Cut your losses and move on. However, looking at that Dundee team and looking at Dundee squad and the fact that the mess in the summer that's led to this wasn't just of Presley's making, is that the concern that even if Presley, if he's sacked, if he walks, whatever, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Dundee will dig their heels in, and I certainly don't think Presley would walk away from this challenge. But that would typically be what you would find in terms of, that's your light at the end of the tunnel, mostly for a football fan, is that you just envision the manager leaves and then things gets better. But unless a new manager comes in and is like, right, your entire plan for building the squad in the summer was complete pish, and I'm only going to take the job if you do X, Y, and Z, or sign X, Y, and Z, and that'll make us better. It kind of feels like these are on a hide into nothing, regardless of who the manager is. Is that fair?
Yes, and I think that's why, in what is an incredibly perverse statement, we need to keep Stephen Presley, because I think that the club needs to see that the plan that has been put in place and the approach that's been taken to pre-season, to recruitment, to who's been appointed as manager was completely and utterly wrong. Because if Presley is booted right now. Whoever we bring in is going to have to be desperate for a job, because they're going to look at the squad, they're going to look at the history of management at Dundee, they're going to look at how little time they've got to implement their ideas, to work out who to bring in, etc. And it's not necessarily going to work out unless it's a manager with an incredible contacts book, connections, who happens to be aware of lots of players in probably a heretofore unknown part of Europe, who could come and do the job. I think that the other thing is that with Presley, I mean, yes, they had something that's emblematic of the position we're in. So it's around about the 70th, 75th minute, and I see Dre Wright and Tony Yogan waiting on the sideline. So they're clearly coming on to switch us to a 4-4-2 to go and, go and attack. They're just about ready to come on. The fourth official's waving, right, okay, on you come. And then, oh, no, wait a minute. We've just got to impart a couple more instructions. They go back to the bench and they're flicking through this book. Craig, from that point, it takes 8 minutes to get them on the park. Because the ball only went out of play once. When it went out of play in our own half for a throw-in, Ethan Ingram runs at the ball, runs faster than he ran at any point during the game, to pick it up and throw it back into play. So we can't make the substitution, and then we can't make it for another 5 minutes. So by the point they come on, it's not that the game's done, but it's going to take far too long for those guys to get into the game. Also, by that point, Presley decided to put on Aaron Donnelly. So Aaron Donnelly's playing right mid. And then he realises, oh, shit, wait a minute, I'm going to have to do something else here. So then he brings on Cesar Garza.
Wait a minute, a centre-half playing right mid isn't conducive to winning football.
Yeah. So then he then puts on Cesar Garza, who, in fairness, is the only player that I saw pressing the ball and harrying the ball, and it was the only point that Hibs looked a wee bit, what's going on here, in the final couple of minutes. But it's so difficult to get a handle on whether the recruitment's been... what the recruitment's been like so far. It's so difficult to get a handle on where, what the actual plan is and where we're going with this, because we've heard now for 3 weeks, it has now been 3 weeks since we've made a signing, and in those 3 weeks we've been told we need 5 or 6 players coming in, and they've still not come in. So it's partly why I think, in a way, we almost just need this to absolutely either fall apart or somehow inexplicably come together with these 6 magical players that are hiding somewhere. Because anything else, and there will just be the ready-made excuse of, oh, the fans harried him out. There was a big plan that was all going to come to fruition, but then we had to get rid of him. So Rangers away next week's not going to go great. Hopefully by that point, Simon Murray will be fit again, which then means that Kelly away, you never know. And then it's the derby at home. Our next home game is the Dundee derby.
Oh, no.
And yeah, so my men's mental health is not in a great place, Craig. But fair enough, fair play to Hibs. They only made one change, which gave me a little bit of hope, because I thought they'll be knackered, they'll be on their feet, but they handled the game professionally. Kieron Bowie looks like, I think he's going to have a really good season if he can stay fit and avoid injury. He's going to be terrific. Mulligan.
Sorry, just talking about Bowie. 66-1 he was at the start of the season to finish top goal scorer. Not saying he's going to, but if you got that on an each way bet, like I did, then there is certainly value in that, because last season he was, obviously it was in limited minutes. I think he only played across the entire campaign, all competitions. I think he only played 875 minutes, if my memory serves me right. But across those 875 minutes, of all the strikers in the top flight, he had the 4th best goals to minutes ratio, behind only... Let's see if I can remember this off the top of my head. Yep, Dyson Maeda, Adam Ida, and Cyril Dessers. And never really much a goal scorer throughout his career. And even like when he was in I think it was League One, he was with Wraith when he first came through. Not the worst goal record, but not exactly like a goal every kind of game type of striker. Then he goes down to Northampton, is in both League One and League Two. Actually did the better goal scored record of League One, but I think it was 1 in 4, 1 in 5, something like that. But he's been scoring he's been getting chances. He's been scoring for Hibs. Even the European games, he didn't score, but obviously had the goal disallowed in the second leg against Midtjylland. Had a couple of chances in the first leg, and he seems like he's already proven in these limited minutes that he's not just a big target man striker. No. He's somebody that could score goals for them as well. And I'm the same. I wrote a column about that. I thought that Bowie is. I think that Bowie is Scotland's kind of heir apparent at the number 9 position in terms of long term. I think he is the obvious successor to Dykes And I mean, as I kind of wrote in the article, and Tony, I don't know if we talked about this on a podcast, we just talked about it privately. I've kind of said, like, I can imagine Scotland fans, some Scotland fans being like, "Oh Christ, is that our future, Kieron Bowie, like a Hibs striker, basically?" Like, I don't want to be insulting Kieron Bowie because I think he's a really good player, but you know, we dream of a forward who is world class, but we're not getting that, and like it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime in the future. And Scotland are just going to have to naturally play with somebody who can battle with opposing defenders, can do some work when they are 20, 30 yards away from their nearest teammate, can make the ball stick out of nowhere, can just be a pest. That's just how we have to operate on the international stage. We wish it wasn't the case, but this is the world we live in. And I think Kieron Bowie, with a few elements of his game that do need to be improved on, can very much become that player for Scotland.
Yeah, and his two finishes were instinctive.
Yes.
Finishes.
The defending, though. Can we talk about the defending?
Oh, can we not? If you look at the back three, we've got Luke Graham. I think he was probably our best player yesterday, which is a low bar to say, but he was our best player at left centre half. He's fine. Clark Robertson is slow. He is not Joe Shaughnessy. I would much rather, and obviously it's not the way it's panned out, but if we had Joe Shaughnessy in the middle of that back three instead of Clark Robertson, I'd feel a hell of a lot better. Ryan Astley at right centre half. We've got a Bulgarian international. I mean, he's not had a cap for a couple of years, but I'm still calling him that. Bulgarian international, Plamen Galabov, who we signed in the summer, who I think is maybe just still getting up to speed. He should be our right centre half, but we played Ryan Astley instead. I quite like Astley, but he was at fault for the goal that Airdrie scored. It maybe seems a little bit unfair, but I'm pinning the blame on him for both of Hibs' goals at the weekend as well. Obviously, the first was a pretty rubbish attempted clearance, which smacked off Ethan Ingram and just landed at Kieron Bowie's feet, and he was just like, "Thank you very much." And then I think it was Samuels went in to deny Obita along with McCracken, but then Astley was just posted missing, picking up Bowie. And as I say, we were better organised defensively, but I still think, when so many individual elements of our defence are those that were present last year, when we conceded 70 odd goals, you're still asking for trouble. I thought McCracken had quite a good game. He made quite a few good saves. I don't think he was particularly at fault for either of the goals, and it looks like he's going to be the number one from here on out, which I think is probably the sensible thing to do, because both he and Carson are in the final year of their contract. Carson's 37, McCracken's 25. And was called up to the Scotland squad.
You may as well see if he can put it all together, and then you've got. But well, to be fair, if he is in the last year of his contract and he puts it all together for a Dundee team, he might be away regardless. But you have to, in that situation, it doesn't make sense to go with especially when Carson's starting to look a bit creaky, and there's the difference in quality between them is receding.
And as well as that, with Carson, we've tended not to play him on artificial or hybrid surfaces,
right?
As well. So with Falkirk and Livy,
surely hybrid surfaces are fine. They're like 97% grass.
Listen. I'm not a sports scientist, Craig. I clearly don't have a clue what's going on. But
can I ask quickly, what kind of positions do you need? What like of the 5-6 players? Where did Dundee really need to fill it?
The most desperate things that we need Luke McCarron back. That's not going to happen. We need someone to link midfield and attack, because basically,
okay. Can I interest you in some players? I feel like I should act on behalf of my club here and start flogging, because Hearts have the most bloated squad in the league, and that is the thing that gives me the biggest cause for concern going into this campaign, is how do you keep 30 players happy? So can I interest you in a Sander Khartoum?
Yes. He is a player that I have seen score against Dundee. No, I would take him. I'd take Jan Danda. If Alan Forrest is on the go, I'd take him as well. Just people in the forward positions is what we need.
Musa Drabi?
I'll take Khartoum. I'll take Jan Danda. I'll take Alan Forrest. Musa Drama's got another place to go, but no, we need a number 10. We've got Finlay Robertson playing number 10. I don't really think it's working out despite his well taken goal. We need a number 10. We need a bit more dynamism in the midfield anyway. We need a right-sided winger and ideally probably another right back as well. At the very least, we're not going to sign any more centre-halves. We're not going to sign another goalie. Maybe a left back as well, because Amari Samuels is still a quote-unquote project player. He's got a decent set-piece delivery, but Callum Jones was on our set-pieces instead of Samuels at the weekend, so I would probably feel more comfortable with Samuels.
Is Amari Samuels a project player, or is he just not very good? Because he was signed midway through last season on a 2.5-year deal, and yeah, you can say that's a project player, but he was immediately thrown into the team and then just didn't play again because he was awful.
Well, I would argue Ziad Larkesh was far better than him, which was why he didn't play. But he's shown
he didn't play because he was immense.
I think it depends on what we're looking for our fullbacks to do. If we're looking for them to defend, he's fine. If we're looking for them to be a more modern fullback, wing-back, who's able to do their defensive duties but also get forward, contribute to attack in more than just dead ball situations, then I feel like Samuels and Ingram are ideally they would be bench players, but there's bigger issues for us to address pretty much all over the park.
Before we move on, very quickly, I interrupted you earlier when you were starting to go through Hibs in a bit more detail, and then we talked about Kieron Bowie. So you mentioned Mulligan. What were you going to say about him?
Just he's slotted into that team really well. I wasn't sure exactly where Hibs would play him because I saw him more often at Dens. He was played as a sort of right wing back, right mid, right wing, whatever. But he's been playing more as a box-to-box centre mid, and I thought that would be a good position for him anyway. But he was bossing the midfield along with Dylan Levitt, and I think Hibs fans seem to have taken to him as well. And I think out of he and Lyle Cameron, obviously they both signed pre-contracts with our Premiership sides in the summer. And I've said in our group chat, and I've said to Tony and anyone who will listen to me, I think Josh Mulligan perhaps has a higher ceiling or will go further than Lyle Cameron will. And that's partly because of the decision that they've taken over where to go. But I think it's also just the sort of the physical characteristics and what they can immediately bring to a side as well. So he played very well. We never tested the back line, but O'Hora and Bushiri and Iredale all looked fine. Iredale slipped aside. I thought Jordan Abita had a really good game as well. Chris Cadden didn't see that much of him, but again, like Hibs did not really need to do all that much to take the lead, keep the lead, and eventually keep the 3 points. I was a little surprised that David Gray didn't rest more players, but I suppose for Hibs they've not had the League Cup group stages to go through, so maybe he was just so wanting to get more minutes into the legs ahead of Thursday.
Right, let's move on to our second game, which, as I said at the top, is Falkirk Dundee United, a 2-2 draw at the Falkirk Stadium. Dundee United twice taking the lead, but Falkirk both times managing to peg them back. The second of which happened, I think it was 45 seconds between the Falkirk kicking off and equalising. So it was Max Waters that got the scoring started for the visitors. Dylan Tate then equalised 5 minutes into the second half. Ivan Dolic then scored for United, and it was Ethan Ross with the equaliser. A fairly even game in which both sides could claim that they should have won it. And a decent result for both teams, I think, given all the circumstances in the end.
Yes, and I think that's, I think both McGlynn and Goodwin will be walking away from that perfectly happy, because for Falkirk, obviously it's flag day, opening day, first game in 15 years in the Premiership. You want to get off to a good start, particularly against a side that has a lot of injury concerns. This early, obviously, United have done a hell of a lot of business in the transfer window this season, but Will Ferry suspended for the first two league games, I think, of the season, suspended for this one and for Hearts at the weekend. Ryan Strain is out injured. There's plenty of others, he says, because I can't find them in my notes, but
I think it was 5 or 6 out injured, but I wasn't sure who the 5 or 6 were, because United have signed that many players this summer that I was like, I'd probably just never heard of them anyway.
But I think the benefit for United was that it forced, or the...
Oh, Traparovsky's one of them that's out as well.
Yeah, and Jorrit van der Sand is another one who he doesn't count.
Yeah,
he doesn't count.
Ross Graham.
That is a big one. Their new club captain. But it did force Goodwin to play a different formation from his favourite sort of 3-4-3 formation. So he had to switch more to a back four with Saveljan at right back, Kereshtes at left back, and just playing Bert Esslink and Yuri Yovu as the centre half pairing. So three of the back four, and actually four of the back five if you include the keeper, all new to Scottish football. I think the signing of theirs that impressed me the most was probably Punice Camara. He seemed to add quite a lot to their midfield. He was one of the later signings. We've not seen as much of him as we have of the other new signings that they've made, but he particularly impressed me out of United's new signings. A little bit more than, actually, even though he scored the goal, Max Waters, who is, I suppose, this season's Sam Dalby, because he's the unfancied English lower league striker who's playing up top with Dolchek and Sapsford either side of him. But as you say, I think that for United, obviously, they've got a huge game against Rapid Vienna in midweek, one that I don't think too many people are given too much of a chance with. And I think the key thing for them was to not lose would I call it fragile? I don't know. Not lose the tentative confidence that fans are trying to build in the new look side, particularly with a keeper that's a bit of a character.
Yeah. He was an aspect of the Dundee United team that I was not entirely impressed with, but I was impressed with some of them. Camara set at the park, excellent performance. Really liked the look of him. He is somebody that I think looks quite rangy. He's big, he's rangy. He seems to have just about everything you'd want in a number 8. And I mean, I'm saying that that's obviously maybe a bit of an overreaction from one 90-minute game, but big, rangy, composed on the ball. He's got the snake hips to turn quickly, which I think is quite key. He can turn defence into attack in the blink of an eye, something that he's done quite a lot in this game. He can shift. And I'd look at his career stats. He's somebody that he can usually rely on to score about 4 goals a season as well, which is always handy for a centre midfielder. So I was impressed with him. I thought him and Craig Sibbald were both excellent in the United engine room. Wasn't entirely sure about their midfield partner, Isaac Papo. He got better as the game went on.
He was someone who, from the little I've seen of him, I think anytime that I am looking at a bet builder for Dundee United, he will be down for a yellow card. And that's actually what happened in this game. Inevitably, with the number of signings United have made, I mean, I think we've already covered on the pod that Alan Temple, a friend of this parish, said that you could actually set out United signings as a full side, a new full side. And inevitably, if you've got 11 players that are new to Scotland, there's going to be law of averages. A third of them will either be mediocre or not pass muster for whatever reason. And I think Papo maybe falls into that bracket. I think what's been a huge boon for United has been, I think, Craig Sibbald coming back into the team. I think he was one of their best players, or one of their most valuable players against Una Strassen in midweek. And obviously he set up one of the goals at the weekend against Falkirk as well. So still having a couple of players who have that institutional memory of the SPFL is definitely going to help them. And obviously one of their big players as well is still Vichko Savelj, who my autocorrect changed into, was it severe destruction?
No, yes. Vicious. Was it not vicious destruction?
Vicious destruction, I think it was. And yeah, so it's a frustratingly... They've not fully gelled yet, but as you've said, you can see. I think Bert Essling's going to be a very classy player for them at the back as well. I really like to look at him. I thought he defended not only good on the ball, but I thought he defended really well. Yeah, deeply frustrating when I look at my own team's transfer business on the other side of the street that this is happening. But never mind, I'm over it, Craig.
Ovo seems like he might be a wee bit more dodgy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, his goal against Una Strassen he was left totally unmarked. I mean, 6'5". Of course, he's going to score the header. But yeah, he's perhaps more of another project player, as I've already said on the pod. But no, it's a good point for United, but equally a good point for Falkirk as well.
Yeah, and I think it's crucial as well. You talk about kind of confidence, like Falkirk. So Falkirk fans, as we expected, Falkirk fans weren't happy that Tony, myself and Joel all picked them to finish bottom of the league. I think in the Terrace hive mind, we had them 11th as well.
Yeah, Dundee are bottom.
Dundee are bottom.
They're 11th.
Which, actually, looking at both teams on the opening weekend of the season, that might actually be a better shout. We might have just... I think we maybe underappreciated how bad Dundee were when we were making those predictions. But for Falkirk, so... To me, looking at Falkirk and their chances of surviving this season, there was positives and negatives from this game, which you could probably deduce, considering it was a 2-2 draw.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was huge that they didn't lose it, because losing the first game, because this Falkirk team, I think you can see right away, I would worry about them defensively. I didn't like the signing of Lewis Nielsen. Similarly, I didn't like the signing when St Johnstone made it last season, and St Johnstone ended up finishing bottom and went out of the league as well. St Johnstone signed that would be a starting centre-back, and quite quickly it became evident that wasn't a recipe for success. In the end, they only started 16 league games, and they moved them about a bit as well, playing it right back at times, playing in the centre of the park at times. Now, Cole Donaldson is still to come back, but he's very much in the same boat of a lot of these Falkirk players, in that he previously wouldn't have said he was Premiership standard, but having won the Championship, he's earned the right to disprove those assumptions. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens when he comes back. But neither goal that they conceded was good from a Falkirk perspective. Liam Henderson, a wee bit unlucky, but at the same time, he doesn't get his feet sorted quickly enough. If he does, he probably is managing to clear that a lot higher up the park, and then Waters doesn't have the chance to rifle it into the back of the net. I mean, he couldn't really miss, but it was still a kind of nicely emphatic finish at the end of it. And then Nielsen for the second, man, it's just really poor. Dolchik it's a nice enough goal, but he's basically running in a straight line, and you're just kind of running out the way of him. And while I thought that in possession, Spencer was lax a couple of times and put them in a bit of bother, Tate was very good and got the goal as well. I'd still worry about them defensively as a pair in order to try and protect that defence. And I think you saw quite often this game the amount of times that Dundee United kind of had a free run through the middle of the park, and with some better touches and a bit better decision making would have made Falkirk pay a bit more. So I don't think they're going to be able to grind out many games. And that's not what they try to do anyway. But that is just usually what you find from teams at the bottom, near the bottom of the league, who are just about, let's stay in the division first and foremost.
Mm.
So for all of that to work, they're going to have to keep their confidence high. Because if you're a team, like say you're a team at the bottom, say you're like the Hamilton Accies teams of the past, or the Livingston teams of the past, you can lose 4 or 5 games in a row. And then your next game, all you're asking of your individuals in your side is that stay focused, work hard, stay disciplined, do the simple things, and you can win games like that. If you're a team set up to defend, you can win games like that because you can stop the opposition from scoring, first and foremost, and you can get a set piece, you can get a deflection, you can get one moment of magic from one of your better players. It doesn't take an awful lot to win those games if you are as tight at the back as you can be. For Falkirk to go out and outscore teams, and I would say, like I said, I thought Tate played very well. I thought Miller and Ross were lively. Miller kind of dropped out of it a bit, but he was lively early on, then kind of Ross took over from him. Graham was a bit more sprightly than I thought he would be, but I didn't think he played that well. But McKeever looked good off the bench. Arfield was anonymous, but that's kind of, I think, what he is at this stage of his career. He's going to be anonymous unless he's scoring.
Until he's not, yeah.
He's going to be anonymous, and then he's going to chip in with a goal, and he's also going to be like a leader in the dressing room as well. But for Falkirk to do that, they can't really afford to lose many games in a row, because once that happens, with the style of play that Falkirk have, you're asking players to be brave on the ball and to take chances. And if you're losing a lot of matches and fans are getting on your backs, because that's just natural that's going to happen, then players go into their shell. And Falkirk can't really afford that. So they need to keep the good times rolling. And seems it's certainly a lot more easier said than done, but the way to do that is don't lose 4 or 5 games in a row. Just make sure that never happens. Make sure that when you do lose, you manage to pick yourself back up. And to be fair to Falkirk, that is something they've been very good at the last couple of seasons. Anytime they've lost a game, they've come back the next week and won it. I think with maybe the exception of towards the end of last season, I think they did lose 2 on the bounce finally. But every time they lost, they bounced back. So they do have, and you can see it for this game as well, going a goal down twice in what was a huge game for them. They do have a bit of mental resilience about them for a kind of quote-unquote sexy football team.
I think for me, their transfer business, the one that I wasn't sure of was Scott Bain. who obviously he got the nod ahead of Nicky Hogarth at the weekend, and I think the reason for that is that, and obviously we're not privy to the sums involved, but I imagine he didn't come cheap, having spent a couple of years on the bench at Celtic, and not only would he not come cheap, he comes out of match practice, and I know that that's maybe not as much of a thing for keepers as for outfield players, but it's also the opportunity cost of you're spending the wage that he gets on him instead of on, say, an experienced centre half. You could bring Shore up, and I don't think there was nothing that he did yesterday, at least that I can think of, that would have earned that. Like I don't think that he's massively at fault for either of the goals, obviously, but if one of your sort of star signings of the summer that you come up is a new keeper, you want them to be, to prove their weight, and he may do it because obviously Falkirk have got a huge game next week against Livy, the battle of the promoted sides, and then they've got, I think it's Hibs and Aberdeen back to back, who will be distracted by Europe. So this is the point where you want to build that momentum, as you say.
Yeah. This is the. You're right. This is the time for Falkirk, and obviously as well, they're a team coming up with confidence, and you usually see teams that come up from a division below have a good start to the season because that confidence, that momentum is still kind of going through them. Just before we move on, just a couple of things I didn't talk about: Keelan Adams or Leon McCann. Adams, wasn't sure about him in the first half. Second half, much better performance. It plays a huge part in both the goals. And McCann, probably Falkirk's best player on the day. Very impressed by him. His energy getting up and down the flank and his defensive work as well. All great. Right, final game.
Yes.
Celtic won, St Mirren 0. It took a long time, but finally Celtic found the breakthrough. Luke McCowan getting the only goal of the game via the aid of a big deflection. And Gary, I think this is just a case of by any means necessary for Celtic. Rangers dropped points the day before. It's not a great Celtic team as currently constructed. Rodgers seems to be getting increasingly frustrated with the lack of kind of movement on the transfer front. They are going to bring in more players, but Rangers themselves will bring in more players, and there's a period of transition while this Rangers team, if it is ever going to work, are getting used to Russell Martin's system. You don't want Rangers to drop points on the Saturday and then you drop points on the Sunday. You want to use this period to motor away, to give yourselves that advantage, to already have everybody thinking, right, it's just set in stone once again. Celtic are going to win the title. They eventually got that, but they certainly made hard work of it. It was not a good performance by any stretch of the imagination.
No, and you and Taylor will be sitting at home going, well, as I say, that Adamida contributed nothing to proceedings. £9 million Adamida. Celtic, as you say, their front line, Dyson Maeda aside, needs so many new bodies in. And I think just before...
Yang was poor as well on the right. Yeah. Celtic got a big lift from James Forrest coming off the bench.
Yeah, and there's only so many more seasons you can do that, Celtic, because he's getting old. We're all getting old. Time passes whether we like it or not. No, Celtic do need to make new signings. They've been handed a relatively... touchwood, relatively simple Champions League draw. I think it's either Kairat Almaty or Slovan Bratislava that they'll play in the playoff. As you say, it feels like a risky game for the Celtic board to be playing, to almost try to tiptoe their way into the Champions League and to, as you say, motor away, or at least put a wee bit of clear green water between themselves and Rangers. But it's not a vintage Celtic side by any stretch of the imagination.
And even in this game as well, McGregor, I felt, was taking too much time on the ball. Hatate was a bit subdued. Maeda grew into it a bit, but even at the start, he looked a bit subdued as well. It just wasn't really an awful lot to like about the performance. To be fair to them, they did hit the woodwork at least 4 times, maybe even 5 times, and had a goal disallowed. So they were fortunate in the sense that they got their goal late on via one of the multi-million pound subs they could bring on and via deflection. However, Jamal George made a tremendous save in the first half. There was some excellent last-ditch defending from St Mirren, and like I said, Celtic hit the woodwork at least 4 times.
Yeah, as you say, Jamal George thinks St Mirren fans will be relieved that they're getting early Livy Jamal George and not latter era Jamal George on the basis of this performance. So he was good.
Their defensive performance, we could just probably switch to St Mirren right now.
Yeah.
Their defensive performance was excellent. I thought Craig Anderson on the podcast he done with yourself, I believe, was a bit reticent about Dick King following his League Cup group performances. And I saw St Mirren fans themselves concerned about his lack of physicality, but if this display is any indication of how he's going to perform this season, they've got absolutely nothing to worry about. His performance in, I thought his positioning in particular was excellent. Marcus Fraser had at least 2 moments where he denied what was surely a certain goal by clearing it off the toe of an attacker from almost underneath his own crossbar. Gogic was just everywhere at the heart of that defence. I think it was Sutton described him as a sponge. I think that was a good way to put it. Like the ball just seemed to go to him.
Yeah.
Declan John put a power of work. Even Jayden Richardson was not good on the ball, I would say, and that was something about St Mirren's performance in general, which was a bit poor, but defensively he was fine as well. So yeah, the entire back five really stood up to the task at Celtic Park.
But it's a classic. Stephen Robinson, I've not looked at the stats, but I feel like he must have one of the best records against the Old Firm, both on paper and if you actually think about, particularly his St Mirren sides. I can't think of too many games where St Mirren have been absolutely blown away. You're probably about to tell me, but they got beat 4-0 after the split last season or something. But, I don't know if he necessarily treats the League Cup like pre-season, but St Mirren typically don't have a very good pre-season. Their fans get a bit worried. We maybe look at it and go, could St Mirren be regressing this season? And then they come out and do stuff like this. And it's got to be hardened for St Mirren fans, as much as it's still a sickener. I think it's a little bit similar to Hibs with Midtjylland in terms of, there's a gap there. But, St Mirren went out with a game plan. They very, very nearly executed it perfectly as well. I think just touching on, obviously we've mentioned McKerran's deflected goal. Callum McGregor had an effort ruled out for handball as well, which I didn't see it live, but when I saw there was a lengthy VAR check before it was ruled out, I thought, this must be a little bit contentious. But then when I watched it, not live, but sort of in real time, I was like, no, that is a handball. I don't get why this has proven to be so contentious, other than the context of who he plays for and what the game was like at the time. But no, St Mirren will definitely take heart from that. And as for Celtic, it's, I have no dog in the race in so many different ways, but I can absolutely understand why Brendan Rodgers is sort of in a little bit with a Cold War with his board, because it's not a vintage Celtic side. Tierney was taken off. I think some people thought, has he managed to aggravate an old injury? But it was just managing his minutes, it seems.
I think the radio were quite a bit kind of quick to be like, oh no, God, he's injured already. Like it's fine. I was like, he was walking off and he looked to me a bit kind of frustrated. But he wasn't like even limping or anything. He just died. And Roger said afterwards, there's just a bit of cramp. He's not fully up to speed. And I thought like he was not brilliant, but he was like one of Celtic's better players. And all this kind of chat over the summer, like, is he done kind of based on his Scotland performances? I thought that was kind of far too overstated especially from a kind of games where the entire Scotland team was shit as well. And once he's fully fit, he'll be an asset to Celtic. How long he'll be fully fit for over the course of the season is a completely different matter, but there you go. Before we finish, just a couple of things. Since you're on.
Yes.
Luke McCowan.
Yes.
So I said in the podcast with Rob last week for the Patreon that I thought this was a huge season for McCowan in terms of basically what the rest of his career is going to look like at this age. I don't think he's going to go beyond Celtic, and he's probably, due to the fact he cost 1 million and is an ageing Scottish player rather than 11 million and being a young Belgian, that he's just unlikely to command a regular place in the Celtic team, even if he does play consistently well. But what he can do is make himself a regular Celtic contributor off the bench, a kind of Stephen Pearson type of player, maybe you should say. Like somebody can come on and make big impacts and sometimes occasionally start games when it calls for it. Or he could be pushed down the pecking order, end up at a championship club, end up at Hearts, Hibs or Aberdeen, and that's how his future's going to go. So they've signed Nygren, who, him as a player, not... You can see what there was there to work with in this game. I think he looked a little bit out of sorts with his midfield teammates, and I think there's going to maybe take a wee bit of time with bedding in there, but there's another player potentially ahead of him in the pecking order. But the best way to sort that is when he does come on to do something. Yes, huge deflection, probably wouldn't have been a goal otherwise, but you know, he gets the luck by forcing things and taking a chance and coming on and being lively and contributing in ways that many of his teammates weren't doing.
And I think, obviously he grew up a Celtic fan, so I think he'll be happy doing that. Like if he is someone that comes off the bench on the hour mark, or when Celtic fully get into this sort of midweek Sunday, or Saturday, Sunday rotation is maybe getting a couple of starts here and there, I think he'll be quite content doing that. I think he was linked quite closely with Hibs, and I think it would have been really interesting because he would have been one of the main men at Hibs if he'd gone there. But I still don't know what he would have done beyond Hibs, if that makes sense. Whereas you could imagine that in a couple of years' time, potentially, he might want game time, or Celtic, he might have fallen so far down the pecking order he's not even getting that 20, 25 minutes off the bench. But no, he's a really good player. I don't think there's room for him in Steve Clarke's Scotland squad because of the other options that are there. And in a way, that's a shame as well, because I feel, he's not someone who would ever command, a starting place there, but he would be a different option, a different kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. In years before, like in prior years, he would have definitely been in the Scotland squad. Yeah.
And I sort of presumed, he's signed for one of the old firm there. He'll be in the Scotland squad soon enough. But it's not come to pass yet. But no, I think of the three big names, if you will, that have moved on from Dundee, him, Mulligan and Cameron, I think McCowan's the most exciting player of the three. I think Cameron's probably the most technically adept of the three, but I still think that Mulligan is the one who could, I could easily see him going from strength to strength at Hibs and getting signed by a West Brom or something like that. And if he signs for an English Championship club on the upswing, he could somehow pull together a couple of appearances in the Barclays, which would be mad. But yeah, we'll just have to see what other transfer business Celtic do to see if McCowan can continue to play that role that he'll, I think, be fairly content playing, with the faint hope of maybe being the new Callum McGregor somehow.
I'm not sure that's going to happen, but we'll see. Just a final word on St Mirren. I said earlier they were excellent defensively, and they certainly were. Going forward, I think they could have been better, and you'll have regrets that you conceded a goal 88th minute or whatever it was, deflection, but I think they should also have regrets that they didn't do a little bit more to ask questions of Celtic at the other end. They had a huge chance. Ocean Smith, not long after he came off the bench, probably could have done better with that. But that was really the only thing they could have created all game, even in terms of like kind of half chances. I can't really remember too much else. And I think they had opportunities, because they did carry a threat, but they often, like, there was a couple of times Killian Phillips had a chance to spring like dangerous counter-attacks, and his pass wasn't quite there. Mark O'Hara was similar, and he was quite fortunate that he got away with the McGregor disallowed goal, getting robbed on the edge of the penalty area. It was great to see Fraser Taylor get a chance. Kind of, Stephen Robinson's obviously got a bit of faith in him, or at least thinks he could potentially become the new Keelan Boyd-Munce in this team. But I can't help but doubt whether he'll be in the starting 11 for a while now after that. He was hauled off at half-time. He didn't play well. He stood up reasonably well to the aspects of his game where you think he would maybe struggle at Celtic Park, but it was obviously clearly a huge cultural shift, or like shifted atmosphere, going from playing for Arbroath and even playing in the Premier Sports Cup group stages to playing at Celtic Park, because he just continually wanted a bit too much time in the ball and was sloppy in possession in general. Up front, Mandron wasn't bad without doing too much. Ayunga was bad off the bench. And Adui started quite brightly, but then he was pushed back to basically cover for Taylor when Taylor was taken off, and they brought on Ayunga instead, and he kind of fell out of it as things went on. So had they had a couple of... They had huge performances out of defensive players. Had they managed to get a couple out of players further forward, who knows? They really might have got something out of this one, even with Celtic getting the late goal.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to the reverse fixture, we've seen St Mirren have put in some incredible performances against the Old Firm, sometimes helped by the Old Firm themselves, down Paisley Way. So I'm sure that Stephen Robinson will have made those notes and will be ready to come flying at them around about Christmas time.
Yes. Right, Gary, I think that'll do us. Thank you very much for joining me.
Anytime, and I've almost forgotten about Stephen Presley's Dundee.
Well, I'm glad this therapy session worked well for you. Taking your mind off the thing that is most important to you in life at this point in time.
Your rates are very reasonable, Craig. I'll give you that.
I give you money.
That's what I mean.
And I will be back tomorrow with Joel Sked as we talk about the final game from the Scottish Premiership weekend, assuming it goes ahead. Due to the weather, it's putting in doubt a little bit, but indications are the match should go ahead at Tynecastle between Hearts and Aberdeen. It'll be myself and Joe talking about that tomorrow. Thank you very much. Oh, before we go, actually, I should punt the terrace quiz. The next quiz, it's taking place. It's not long now. It's only the 19th of August. It's taking place at the Stockbridge Social in Edinburgh as part of the festival. So if you want to get to the terrace quiz, please get yourself along to that. I will put a link for the tickets in the description. It is a venue that seats, I think it's 300, but half of it is only guaranteed covering. So if you want to make sure that you get a seat in the covering, you better get your tickets early before they all sell up and you're potentially at the mercy of Edinburgh weather in August, which can be unpredictable at the best of time. So, yes, make sure you snap up those tickets. As I say, I'll put a link in the description. The tickets cost only £12, and £2 of that goes directly to charity, to the... Can't remember exactly the name of the community one-stop shop, I believe it is,
yes,
in Broomhouse, the food bank. So, a great cause as well. So, if you're keen, please do that. And that'll do us. Gary, thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig.
And thank you to everybody. We'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye.